We are continuing in this sermon series through the 7 churches of Revelation. I was reading a story of Archie Manning. I don't know if many of you know who Archie Manning is. He is a former new. I know Juan Fallis knows who he is because Juan Fallis. I'll leave you alone, Juan. But Juan knows who Archie is because he's a former New Orleans Saints a quarterback. And so what he's better known as, though, is the father of Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, and this is their other son, Cooper Manning, and this is Archie's wife, Olivia. Well, a few years into Eli and Peyton's NFL careers, they were incredibly successful. There was an article that was written about their family and in a magazine, and Archie one night before he went to sleep was reading this particular article in a magazine with Olivia, his wife, sitting next to him. They'd been married for many years at this point, and as he was reading this article, the writers were praising the success of these two brothers and even commending the parents for how well they had raised their boys. As Archie finished the article, he leaned over to Olivia and he said to her, "Honey, in the 35 years of marriage that we have had, did you ever in your wildest dreams think that we would have the family that we have and the children that are as successful as ours?" And then Olivia leaned back over to Archie and said, "Archie, seldom in our 35 years of marriage have you ever been in my wildest dreams." And who in our wildest dreams would have thought that we would be talking about some of the things that we're talking about? Who would have ever thought in our wildest dreams that we'd be consumed by some of the things that we are currently consumed by? Who would have ever thought that in our wildest dreams that this virus would be consuming so much toilet paper in our world today? I mean, these are just things that we could have never possibly imagined taking place around us. And what we've also found in the midst of all of this is that it can be a bit discouraging. It can be a bit challenging. It's a bit discouraging continually being bombarded with the things that we have been bombarded with, whether it's on the radio or through social media or through the internet or through the television. You just can't seem to get away from it right now. It's not the most encouraging news. For whatever reason, we just haven't quite gotten to that point yet, and so it's a bit discouraging. And in a way, it can cause Christians, unfortunately, to become discouraged. It can even cause churches to become a bit discouraged as we are beginning to process, how do we respond to this? How do we move forward appropriately? It's a challenge, but with challenges come opportunities. They come new levels of things that you can strive for, no doubt about it. But there's an element of discouragement that can still be present, that may have already been present in your home before all of this even happened or in your life. The church that we are going to look at today is a church that seemingly was a bit discouraged. It's one of the few churches that Jesus speaks to, and he doesn't criticize them. He doesn't rebuke them. Instead, he speaks life into their church. He speaks words of encouragement into their church. I think that we're going to find he's going to speak words of encouragement into our church as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this passage of Scripture that offers a description of this church in Philadelphia. And then we're going to go back and look at 2 discouragers and 2 encouragers that the text seemingly points out to us, while there's still much more there, but our time won't allow for that. This is what the text says in Revelation chapter 3. "To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true." So he is the one that is righteous. He is the one that is just. He is the one that is in control. He is holy and true. "Who holds the key of David." We'll pause there. David is a personification of Israel. That is what Jesus is getting at here. It is a personification of the Jewish people. And he says, "I hold the key." Well, what key does he hold? Well, if you go back to Revelation 1, Jesus says, "I hold the key of death and Hades and life," he's saying to them. I hold that key. Well, why was that significant for these particular people? That was significant because these Jewish Christians were still honoring their Judeo history, their Judeo culture, and so they would still worship at the synagogue. Well, the Jewish leaders in this particular city have kicked them out of the synagogue. The synagogue represented, still too many of them, a place where they would come and they would find life, the life that God had for them. And what Jesus is saying here is this. He says, we'll go on. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds, okay? He's saying, I have a key, and what does a key do? A key opens a door, it shuts a door. If you have the key, nobody else can mess with the door. And Jesus is saying, I know they've slammed the door in your face. I know they've kicked you out. I know that they have ostracized you. I know you are discouraged. I know that you feel like you have been disconnected from the place that you feel like you should get life from. Because again, there was still some of that residual effect from their culture that was there. And he's saying, you shouldn't think like that. You shouldn't worry about that. Because they say they own that key. They say they have that key. They say that they have access to life. And what I'm telling you is that they don't. I have the key of David, not them. And I know your deeds. And he says, see, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength. What he's saying there is he's making reference to the size of this church, the influence of this church, that there wasn't much that was there. They were small, maybe even just a dozen people. There wasn't a lot of influence that they had on their culture and their society. And Jesus says, I know that you have a little strength. I know there's not much that you can do about this. I know that there is a significant amount of limitations on what it is that you can do. Yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name, because there was pressure for them to do that. I will make those, check this out, I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. I mean, that's not very Jesus-like, is it? I'm going to make them fall down at your feet and say, I love you. What is Jesus doing here? Because this isn't obviously something that we should demand from somebody. This isn't even something that we should think that somebody should do for us. So what is he doing here? Well, Jesus is accentuating the point that he's going to make, that what they believe is right and what these other people believe is wrong. That's hard for us to wrap our mind around in our culture, in our Western society, but imagine it like this, and I think this will settle it in a little more for you. Imagine you're kidnapped from Africa in the 17th or 18th century. You're put on a boat with shackles. You sail across the Atlantic Ocean for weeks. You eventually are sold to a plantation owner where you are beaten, you are whipped, and you are literally treated like a piece of property. And yet you are a Christian person. You're singing hymns to God. You're studying the scriptures. You're trying to stay faithful to God. And then you have a slave owner who has done these horrible things to you, and they are saying they worship the same God. And Jesus would look at that person and say, they are a liar. And I'm going to make that person come and bow down at your feet and show them that they were wrong and that what you have done is right and staying faithful to me. See, from our perspective, it's hard to understand, but if you were in that kind of a situation, you get the point. Jesus is offering encouragement to these people. He's offering them a chance to be lifted up. And he's saying, I'm going to make them bow down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you, even though they say I don't. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, we'll talk about that in a little while, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. Now, there are several views of this. I'm going to skip ahead here and I'll come back to that text. This is a millennial view for what exactly it is that Jesus is talking about for this hour of trial that is going to come. There is a premillennial view that would say that he's going to keep them from that hour that's going to come. I'm going to work from the bottom up, by the way. That would be called the rapture. He's going to rapture them before that. That's what that text, some would say, speaks towards. There's also this post-tribulation premillennialism view here that honestly it's a bit difficult to entirely understand, but it's just an idea that there's going to be a tribulation that's going to take place, but before the tribulation becomes too extreme, you're going to be taken up. There's a post-millennial view that would have a similar type of an idea for us, but then they would also say that things are just going to get better, and then he's going to take you home before that final judgment. And then there's a millennial premillennial view that would really speak more to the historicity of Philadelphia. And by that I mean that there was some sort of a trial that was going to come upon the city of Philadelphia that would challenge the faith of these people. And Jesus is saying, when that time comes, I'm going to take you away before that time ever comes. I'm going to take you away before the city would ultimately be conquered by the Turks, by people of Muslim faith. That's what some would say Jesus is speaking to here. And that's really for you to decide what he means. But we'll come back to where we left off here. And so he's going to remove them before this testing comes. I'm coming soon, he says. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. Now that's pretty encouraging. He's going to make you a pillar. He's going to make you a post. That doesn't make any sense. He's not going to make you a post. What is he saying? I'm going to make you a pillar. I'm going to make you a presence in this temple. Well, again, we got to go back and understand a little bit of the history of Philadelphia. In AD 17, there was an incredibly traumatic earthquake that came upon this region of the world. Pliny the Elder wrote, he said, this is the most traumatic, most significant event that has taken place in human history. That's how significant the earthquake was. The church we studied last week, Sardis, was completely destroyed. Philadelphia was nearly destroyed, but Philadelphia was closest to the epicenter of where the earthquake began, and what that caused was a series of tremors that would continue on for several decades afterwards. Now, where am I going with this? Well, where is the safest place to be, especially in this particular time, if an earthquake's taking place? It's outside. It's in a field. You want to get out of the city. That's the safest place because something's going to fall on you. Things are going to crumble around you. You don't want to be around those types of things. You want to get away, as far away as you can. That's where safety was for these people. And here's what's so intriguing about this promise that Jesus says. He says, in my temple, you'll get to be a pillar there. You'll get to stay there. He's going to make reference to the city here in a moment. You don't have to run out anymore. Never again will they, these faithful ones, have to leave it. Jesus is saying, I know that in your particular city, you aren't safe because of the things that are happening around you. But in my city that one day you will be able to inhabit, you will never have to leave it again. Even in spite of these uncontrollable circumstances that are around you, you will be able to remain there. You'll be able to be a pillar there. And then he goes on, I will write on them the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So what is he talking about? There's a lot of this renaming. Well, again, if you understand what happened, historically, after these earthquakes took place, you'll understand why they're saying this. Portions of Philadelphia were renamed after Caesars, who granted taxation reprieves, who removed the burden of taxation on the people of Philadelphia. They had portions of their city named after these Caesars to honor them. That's what he's getting at here. And he's saying that I know you've had parts of your cities named after, a new name has been placed on them, but ultimately my city will have the ultimate and final name, the name that really matters, the name that will last into all of eternity. And he says, whoever has an ear, let him hear. Whoever has an ear, let him be encouraged. And so what is it that Jesus is telling us here that he points out that could be discouraging to us and then also encouraging to us? Well, the first thing is this. A cause of discouragement is people who are against you. He speaks into, again, those liars from the synagogue who were against them. It's discouraging when people are against you. And many of you have that happening in your lives. You have maybe a boss that you feel like is against you. You have a coworker who is against you, and they don't want you to get the raise. They don't want you to get the deal. You have a family member who is against you. Maybe you have an ex-spouse who is against you. You have an attorney who is against you right now. You have people who are against you. It's hard to be encouraged when people are adamantly against you, isn't it? What should we make of this? Well, I'm drawing back to the story in Daniel chapter 6, in which Daniel, he is a part of the cabinet if you will, of King Darius. And as he is a part of this cabinet, there's other members of this particular group who are jealous of Daniel. And they want to get Daniel pushed out of this particular inner circle of Darius, because they know that Darius is about to promote Daniel up to oversee all of them. So they influence King Darius, unbeknownst to him, to create an edict that would trap Daniel. The edict was this, that for 30 days, the only person that anyone could pray to would be King Darius. And the reason that they did that in this particular time was, one, to appease the vanity of these particular kings and emperors. Another reason was the kings would allow this to happen because it united their empires, or at least so they believed. And so Daniel is praying to his God, because he's not going to pray to Darius, and the cabinet members catch him. King Darius realizes that he's been had, but he can't rescind the edict. And so he sends Daniel to a lion's den. And it's there God would honor Daniel's faithfulness, and he would shut the mouths of the lions. King Darius comes back to the den the next day. He sees that Daniel is alive. And this is what the text says. King Darius would then say about Daniel's God. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in heavens and on earth. Do you catch what's happening here? You have a pagan king who's now giving glory to God. That because of Daniel's faithfulness, even in spite of the fact that people were against him, there was someone else who gave glory to God because of that. And that's what I think you have to understand, is that there are people around you who are watching the way that you handle the situation that you are in, the challenges that you deal with. They're watching the way that you deal with maybe that ex-spouse. They're watching the way that the attorneys treat you. They're watching the way that boss treats you, that coworker treats you. They're watching these particular things, and there are people around you that when they see your faithfulness, maybe like King Darius, they'll give God glory. And what does Romans 8 promise us? Romans 8 promises us this. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can really be against us? And that's what Jesus is telling this church in Philadelphia, that you don't have to worry about these people who are against you, because I hold the key of David. And the lesson, the encouragement, the promise that we can hold on to that can give us encouragement in this time is that if God is for you, no one can be against you. If God is for you, the God of the universe is for you, no one can be against you. I mean, imagine that just for a moment, that if there was a being or a thing that was just significantly greater than our planet, I mean, we would fall at our feet before that thing, that being. And that is what God is to the entire universe. And that God is for us. It'd be like when, I remember there was one of my kids who was in a process of kind of getting picked on a little bit, and this kid was yelling at him, and I walked over there, and immediately it stopped. That's what we have in God. We have one who is for us, and when he is for us, it doesn't matter who is against you. The trick is, are you allowing God to really be for you? Are you receiving that? There's a thing that presidents have. We all know of this. We've heard of this. It's called a presidential pardon. It's greater than any other pardon that our country has available to us. Some presidents use it more freely than other presidents. If you look back through the history of presidencies, generally they have used it if they feel like the court system or the judicial system has been a bit unfair. They also use the pardon when they feel like it would offer tranquility to the Commonwealth, to our country. And so it's one of those things that when you have the president for you, it doesn't matter who's against you, it doesn't matter what the ruling is, that when that pardon is issued, that's the greatest thing that is being issued or can be issued for you. But there was an odd story from the 1800s about that. There's a man named George Wilson, with a man named James Porter. They robbed a stagecoach and killed a man. Well, immediately it was a capital offense, and so they were to be hanged for that. James Porter was hanged, but George Wilson had some very influential friends And these friends of his commissioned Andrew Jackson, the president, to issue a pardon for George Wilson. And that's exactly what Andrew Jackson did. But here was the tricky thing. George Wilson never received the pardon. He wouldn't accept it. The court systems had no idea what to do with that. They had never experienced anybody who would refuse a presidential pardon. Who in their right mind would ever do that? It made it all the way to the Supreme Court, where John Marshall, arguably the greatest Supreme Court justice that we've ever had, issued this decree. He said, a pardon is a piece of paper that the matter of which depends upon its acceptance by the person implicated. It is hardly to be supposed that one under sentence of death would refuse to accept the pardon, but if it is refused, it is no pardon. George Wilson must be hanged. In other words, even though you have the president for you, even though you have this pardon in your hands, and ultimately you have to receive it. And that's the encouragement that I have for you, is that you have the God of the universe who is for you. Don't be so silly as to refuse that. Don't be so silly as to ignore that, to pretend like that isn't a thing. It's a real thing. And you may get thrown into a lion's den. But the challenge isn't necessarily the promise isn't for us to avoid the lion's den. The challenge for us is to stay faithful in the midst of it, and somehow out of it, God gets the glory. If God's for you, no one can be against you. The other discouraging thing that this church had to deal with was uncontrollable challenges. They dealt with these earthquakes. People honestly thought they were crazy to even live around the city of Philadelphia in this particular time. There is writings of people writing to other individuals in Philadelphia saying, you need to move away from this city. There's no reason for you to be in Philadelphia. You have no future in this city. Some of us came, maybe you came from a town in which you tried to get away from it as soon as you could. And you look back on that town right now. I have one of those towns in my childhood, young childhood, and I look back on it and I'm thinking, why would anybody live there? Nothing good comes out of that place. I have a heart for the place. I'd like to help the place, but I'm thinking I would never raise my family up in that town. And that's what people viewed Philadelphia as, is this place like, why would anybody stay there? Why would they live there? Why would they raise their family there? Because there were so many uncontrollable challenges, specifically with earthquakes. And I know it's been said, but that's kind of what we're dealing with now. Is this uncontrollable challenge that is a virus that is consuming it's consuming our airwaves, and it's consuming our thought processes, our conversations. It's a really challenging thing, and sadly, some people are losing their lives because of it. As I was looking at this, though, this past week, I was wondering, how is it that what are some really odd and uncontrollable ways that people are losing their lives around our world? And as I was looking at this, I thought I'd just throw this out there, just some other things, uncontrollable things in some ways that we ought to avoid, just for an example. Hippopotamuses. Did you know 500 people die annually from hippopotamuses? It's incredible. And I lived in Florida. I literally saw hundreds of alligators, okay? People are more scared of an alligator than they are of a hippopotamus. And that, you have to want to be eaten by an alligator to get eaten by an alligator. I'm just telling you, you literally have to put a piece of your body into its mouth. They want nothing to do with you. But if you see a hippo, it will kill you. And why is that? You want to know why this is? Why are we not scared of hippos, but we're scared of alligators? It's because of the game, Hungry, Hungry Hippo. And that is a true fact. True fact. Icicles kill 100 people a year annually. Cows kill 22 people annually in America. Selfies, 25 plus deaths annually from selfies. Vending machines. 3 deaths annually. Vending machines. If it takes your dollar, just let it go. You literally, you could lose your life over that. And I'm trying to bring some humor out in this season that we're in. There are a lot of things around us that are unforeseen, and are challenges that are a bit difficult for us to deal with. But God has promised us that he won't put us through more than we can handle. 1 Corinthians says this, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. He says, in this world you will have trouble. But he says, take heart. John 16, I have overcome the world. And my source of encouragement for you is that God will never let you go through more than you can handle. And I have no doubt that you're going through some things right now, some challenges, and we all have these things around us that are incredibly challenging, just like this church in Philadelphia did. But God's not going to put us through more than we can handle. And it's in this time that we need to take precaution, but we also need to have faith. And this too, one day it will pass. And when it does, we'll be better for it. I'm sure of that. Because God has promised us that. And so take heart, have faith, and be encouraged that the God of the universe is for you. And he's not going to let you go through anything more than you can possibly handle. Let's have a word of prayer. We'll close out. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for Christ, and we're grateful for the hope that we have in him. Lord, in this world we will have trouble, and now we are in a season of trouble. But there's hope. And hope requires perseverance. Lord, strengthen your spirit in each of us that we may persevere in this time. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.